Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly sleep clinic to help us all sleep better, longer, deeper. And we have Elizabeth here, Elizabeth Howard. She's amazing. She knows a lot about forest bathing, and I went on one of her sessions, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I'd want because it was amazing how much something going in the forest, an open space, can help us sleep. So please carry on, Elizabeth. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very kind and warm welcome, Yewande. So, a tiny bit of background about me. So, I got into forest bathing through my last job. I used to work at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, and they wanted some guinea pigs for a course that they were going to run. My boss said, "Would you like to go along? Because we need numbers, we need bodies." And I went along, and it completely floored me the first session. I'd never done anything like it before. And I'm someone who's always gone for walks in woods or forests, but this was something completely different. It wasn't a walk. This was time where you almost stepped back into yourself, and you took the time to be very still and very calm. And it was this a profound shift in the body from we have two nervous systems. One's the sympathetic nervous system, one is the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is where we're constantly doing things and we're running around and we're wondering what to make for dinner tonight and what time to pick the kids up and what's happening on our phone, what's happening at work, and it's screens. And that's stress. That's lots of stress building up. And when we take time to step back from that, going into a forest environment, and we turn our phones off and we don't look at the phone and we don't chat with other people that we've gone on a walk with, we just literally zone out and start looking at our breathing and what's around us using our five senses. That's when the body flips into what's known as the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the nervous system which helps us to rest, digest, repair. And that's what helps us have better sleep, because that's when the hormones that make us feel better, like dopamine and serotonin, increase in the bloodstream, and the ones that cause us all the stress and anxiety, cortisol, particularly, and adrenaline, they start to drop in the bloodstream. And if we go into the forest regularly, it's cumulative, and it starts to build and build and build. And research has even shown that going into the forest in the afternoon will have even more profound, deeper effects on the body. The key thing, though, is to do it mindfully, quietly, preferably with a guide, because then you're sort of steered to doing various activities which will enhance your ability to have either a longer length of sleep or better quality of sleep. There's loads of papers been now written on this subject, so it's not something that's we know, oh, we kind of think this is what happens. There's now scientific proof. There's been lots of medical studies done, particularly in Japan, which is where forest bathing kicked off. Might just tell you a bit about why it kicked off there. Japan is a nation that you could actually call a forest civilization. So it's a nation that's very, very heavily forested. It's one of the most heavily forested nations in the world, believe it or not. It's very similar in coverage to Sweden and Norway, but the difference for Sweden and Norway is they have tiny, tiny populations, whereas Japan is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. And yet their love of their forests is embedded in their philosophy, their religion, and their culture. And by the beginning of the 1980s, the government was getting concerned that too many people were coming to their GPs, going to hospital with symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression, bad sleep, high blood pressure, digestive issues. And they could see that this was going to be a long-term issue that could sort of balloon and explode in the future. And at the same time, the forestry department realized that they wanted to do some kind of a national campaign to get people to preserve and respect and rekindle their love for their forests. So the two departments, the health department and the forestry department, got together, and it was a national campaign to get people back out into the forests. And it did the trick. And the government then, being Japan, they're all research obsessed. They thought, hi, we need to look at this seriously now and see if we can draw some scientific conclusions, because they are a nation of science nuts. And they brought over a Chinese doctor who was working in California at the time, doing research on forests. And that was back in the late 80s. And he's still there. He still hasn't retired. He's still at the Nippon Medical School, doing amazing research, taking people out into forests and measuring blood pressure, measuring hormone levels. And he has for sure shown that there are scientific and absolute benefits for the body when we change how our body functions physiologically and we take it out of a stressful environment and into a much calmer environment. Research has even been done that if you were to take a group of people for a walk in a city and compare the same time of day, same size of group, take the same group, a comparative group, into a forest where they are quietly doing exercises, the two do not compare. The people who do walk in an urban area, cortisol levels, adrenaline levels are still very high. They're still anxious, whereas the other group are much more calmer. They're more serene. They feel chilled out. They just feel completely different, and they just go, "Wow, didn't think this could be like this in a forest." Something I've noticed a lot from participants is, because I do at the moment, I work in 2 sites within West London, and they say, "Oh, walked our dog in this park or walked our dog in this wood for so many years, and I never felt this calm after a walk, and I never really noticed what was around me, and yet I know this wood like the back of my hand." So there are for sure benefits. It's just it is for sure cumulative. But it's all the little things that will build up on it, whether you're anxious or you're feeling slightly depressed that day if you go for a walk. All of these things, once you start a regular pattern of walking very gently, very calmly, very quietly, it does build, and it does have very profound physiological benefits to the body. And it's not just sleep patterns, it will affect your blood pressure, memory, even one of the biggest ones is your immune system. It really boosts your immune system. Not wishing to blow my own trumpet here, but since I qualified as a guide, once I was training the second module, I had left work because I couldn't cope with trying to do the course and work. And since then, since starting the practical module and since doing forest bathing as a guide, I have not been ill once. And I'm someone who is constantly ill from stress and anxiety at work. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So I am for sure a massive fan of forest bathing, in what it can do for sleep, your quality of sleep, your length of sleep, as well as your general well-being. And I do believe that once your general well-being is lifted to a more comfortable and happy level, your body will naturally sleep better. The two just go hand in hand. If our bodies are in a better condition, whether we're feeding it correctly, whether we're taking the time to give it that time in nature, that nature therapy and everything that we can do to help has massive positive effects on our well-being and ultimately our sleep, for sure. So yeah. So an interesting other thing that comes out of research done in Japan was much of the medical equipment that you now find in hospitals monitoring was developed in Japan because they were so keen to understand how the body reacts to being less stressed and calmer. So it's quite, I never connected the two. I was reading an article way back last year, and it just surprised me that medical equipment was developed back in the 80s, early 90s, and is now used in hospitals, not for other purposes, like scanning what's happening in the brain. But initially, these things were developed to look at why we react the way we react when we go out into the forest, which is quite amazing, really. But yes, for sure, It has massive effects on long-term, even things like confusion, your ability to remember and recount things later on. It's also been shown to help with people who have ADHD, who are very restless, who find it very, very difficult to be still. If you go out into the forest regularly, forest bathing will also help with that, because it's basically leveling out your stress hormones, and that does have a massive effect on us in general. But our immune system, for sure, there is massive benefits. One of the main researchers in this field, he's now Professor Ching Li, has found that spending just 2 hours twice a month on a forest bathing session has marked very, very deep effects on our immune system, and it raises your white blood cells, which are the blood cells that are responsible for fighting infections. So it raises those considerably, and it will keep them raised for up to 2 to 3 weeks, because he would then take blood samples from his cohort of people that were his guinea pigs. And the other one that it also has a massive effect on is something called the anti-cancer protein. That is significantly raised in your body once you do regular sessions. So this all then feeds back. If your immune system is healthy, you're going to be more likely to sleep better as well. But it does, and obviously the ultimate is to actually spend some time sleeping outdoors in a forest. Then that is, if you can get yourself together and go camping, even just once every 3 or 4 months, one night outside under a canopy of trees, that is so beneficial to the body, because you are in an environment where you are not only breathing in fresh air, but if it's something called an ancient forest, because you can have veteran forests, ancient forests, and plantations which have been planted by man to have forests for timber purposes. But if you are out camping in a forest which has ancient trees, so those are trees that are at least 100 years old, trees give off something called phytoncides. So those are basically the essential oils that you would go and buy or that Yewande makes in little bottles. The tree will give those off naturally. That's what it's exuding when it sweats, when it transpires, especially in the summer and during the winter, because like us, it's a living, breathing organism, even in the middle of winter, despite it may have no leaves on it. So when this transpiration is going on and these phytoncides are being released from trees, when we breathe those in, that has been shown to be incredibly beneficial to the body. So spending one night out camping in a forest, you are multiplying that goodness for your body by hundreds of times. But that is the ultimate aim, is to once in a while be able to just leave everything behind, take a backpack, take a tent, sleeping bag, and go out the outdoors. And I remember as a kid, when we used to go on camping holidays, I could never understand why I had so much bags of energy. And you could be running around all day long, exhausted, and yet you'd wake up the next day, it's like, yeah, off we go again. And now that I can link the research up with him, the pennies dropped. That's why we always have bags of energy. Yeah, so it is a life, for me, it's been for sure a life-changing and a game-changing experience to have the privilege, if that's the right word, to be able to guide people and notice the change. I have some participants who've come on this journey for quite a few sessions now, and to see the change in them, how they have changed, how they become, the first few sessions they come, they're stressed even at the beginning, but as time goes on, as one who's a teacher, and when she now comes, her look on her face has changed completely, because I can see that she's more rested. She's not so stressed. She can take what life presents and throws at her in the school environment. It becomes more, okay, it is what it is. I'm not going to allow this to get to me. And I've slept well, and I've and it has positive effects. So I highly, highly recommend it. either with somebody or on your own, but obviously doing it with somebody is much more, it's a guided process. But yes, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, I know myself, if I haven't been out on a regular basis, I know myself that I start to feel slightly more agitated, because as humans, we're at the end of the day, we are animals, and we are supposed to be, and we have been for squillions and squillions of years, outside in nature. And the way society and civilization is working at the moment, it makes us feel that we should be inside, we should be in front of our screens, we should be looking on our phones, we should be doing this, instead of being, no, we're part of nature. These boxes that we live in and that we drive in and that we go to work in, and the tube and the underground and the trains, that's fine. But if we don't balance and bring our bodies back into balance and taking ourselves back out into where we were for thousands of years, the outside, that also will increase our stress levels and make us more anxious, etc., etc. So yeah, it's I think the big thing is to remember that we belong outside in the natural environment, and not necessarily to spend so much time indoors, and just to help that, yet another thing and another layer that can help us sleep better, for sure. But yeah, sorry, I've probably gone on a bit too long.
No, it's great. Thank you very much. Thank you for telling us about being outside, being in nature, how it helps our immune system, how it talks directly to our parasympathetic nervous system, how it
Absolutely.
calms us.
Yeah.
It's really good. So what's your definition of a forest?
It doesn't have to, I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to sort of take yourself off to Snowdonia and find the biggest acreage of trees. Ideally, you want to be somewhere where you have a fairly decent covering of trees above your head. So when you look up, you can still see a bit of sky, but there is like a big canopy over you, even in the winter, if it's just the bare twigs, because the trees are obviously still living, and it's still an environment that is producing these phytoncides, which are so good for us. But even just a wood, if you've got trees in your local park, if you can find a quiet area to just even sit under and maybe touch the trees, to sort of connect yourself with a tree, or some trees that draw your attention, and you want to see, oh, what would be like to touch this tree? Any kind of a connection that you give is also the physiological connection, the physical connection with your hands. That's also going to be quite grounding for the body. And an interesting, I don't know how they worked this out. They probably did looked at stress levels and hormones. But if you're going to touch a tree, it has to be for a minimum of 21 seconds before the body kicks in and realizes what's happening. That physical touch has reached, oh, my hand is touching, and the signal goes to the brain. And it has to be a minimum of 21 seconds before your hormone levels start to drop, which is quite interesting. So that's, yeah, I think it's the same actually for a hug. A minimum of 21 seconds before the hug starts to be engaged, and
Oh,
the heart
interesting.
starts to, beats of the heart start to drop. So yeah.
Lovely.
So yeah, any kind of wood. If you're able to go into an ancient forest, of which there are not many left in this country, because we only have a very shameful 13% of the country still covered with woodland, whereas in Japan it's almost 73%,
Amazing.
and that country is densely populated with massive urban populations, and yet it's still got an incredible coverage of trees compared to this country, which is quite sad, really. But if you can get into somewhere like the New Forest or Sherwood Forest around Nottinghamshire, they are very ancient forests. But even just little pockets, we have Perivale, Horsenden Hill, that's got ancient trees in it, and that's a so little tiny pocket of trees that are hidden away, and it's an absolute gem, that place. But anywhere, even if they're young trees, just spending time under a canopy is incredibly good for you. Just observing what's around you, tuning your ears in, engaging the senses, for sure.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us about
You're very welcome.
breastfeeding. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.